Have you ever heard of a battle so decisive it completely redrew the map of the Middle East? A clash where a desperate, nomadic tribe, outnumbered and on the brink of starvation, faced off against one of the most powerful empires of its time. This isn't a fantasy epic. This is the incredible true story of the Battle of Dandanaqan, a pivotal moment in history that saw the birth of one great empire and the beginning of the end for another. Get ready, because we're about to dive deep into the dusty, sun-scorched plains of Central Asia to witness how the Seljuk Turks, led by two brilliant brothers, Tughril and Chaghri Beg, outsmarted and utterly crushed the mighty Ghaznavid Empire. To truly grasp the significance of Dandanaqan, we need to understand the players. On one side, we have the Ghaznavid Empire. Think of them as the 11th century superpower of the region. Founded by Turkic slave soldiers, they had built a vast, wealthy empire stretching from modern-day Iran to Pakistan. Their capital, Ghazni, was a center of culture and learning. Their army was the stuff of legends, a massive, professional force equipped with the best armor, heavy cavalry, and a terrifying corps of war elephants. At their head was Sultan Mas'ud, a man who inherited this powerhouse from his famous father, Mas'ud of Ghazni. Mas'ud was proud, perhaps a little too proud, and confident in his empire's military might. He saw the Seljuks as nothing more than a nuisance, a band of rogue nomads to be swatted away. On the other side were the Seljuks. They were a branch of the Seljuk Turks, nomadic pastoralists who had been migrating westwards from the Central Asian steppes for generations. They were tough, hardened by a life on the move, and they were masters of mounted archery. Unlike the heavily armored Ghaznavid knights, the Seljuks were all about speed and mobility. Their leaders, the brothers Tughril and Chaghri Beg, were a perfect duo. Tughril was the political strategist, the future sultan. Chaghri was the military genius, a commander who understood the steppe way of war better than anyone. For years, the Seljuks had been searching for a homeland, for pastures to graze their flocks. They had trickled into the Ghaznavid province of Khorasan, a fertile region in what is now northeastern Iran, Turkmenistan, and Afghanistan. Their presence was a constant thorn in Sultan Mas'ud's side. The road to Dandanaqan was paved with years of raids, skirmishes, and broken treaties. The Seljuks would raid Ghaznavid towns for supplies, and the Ghaznavids would send punitive expeditions to chase them off. But catching the Seljuks was like trying to catch the wind. Their light cavalry could strike and vanish before the heavy Ghaznavid army even knew what was happening. Tensions escalated. Mas'ud, tired of these constant annoyances, decided it was time to put an end to the Seljuk problem once and for all. He assembled a colossal army, a force so large he was certain it would crush the nomads into oblivion. It was a sledgehammer being prepared to crack a nut. In the spring of 1040, Sultan Mas'ud marched his grand army from his capital into Khorasan, determined to hunt down and destroy the Seljuk. The Seljuk leaders, Tughril and Chaghri, knew they couldn't possibly win a direct, pitched battle against such a force. Their own numbers were far smaller, perhaps only 16,000 to 20,000 nomadic horsemen. They were not a professional army. They were an entire people on the move, with their families and flocks in tow. So, they did what nomads do best. They used the land itself as a weapon. As Mas'ud's massive army advanced, the Seljuks employed a brilliant scorched earth and guerrilla warfare strategy, orchestrated by the cunning Chaghri Beg. They systematically destroyed wells, burned pastures, and poisoned water sources along the Ghaznavid army's path. Small, lightning-fast groups of Seljuk horse archers would constantly harass the lumbering Ghaznavid columns. They'd appear on the horizon, unleash a shower of arrows into the surprised ranks, and then melt away before any effective counterattack could be mounted. These weren't decisive attacks, but they were demoralizing. They wore down the Ghaznavid soldiers, frayed their nerves, and, most importantly, exhausted their supplies. The giant army was slowly being bled dry, not by a single great battle, but by 1,000 tiny cuts. The Ghaznavid army, accustomed to well-supplied, decisive campaigns, began to suffer. The scorching desert heat was relentless. Water was scarce and often foul. Forage for the thousands of horses and pack animals was non-existent. The soldiers grew thirsty, hungry, and exhausted. Their morale plummeted. Sultan Mas'ud, however, pushed on, blinded by his pride and his underestimation of his enemy. He was determined to force a battle, convinced that once he could pin the Seljuks down, his superior numbers and heavy troops would carry the day. Finally, after a grueling march, the desperate Ghaznavid army reached the vicinity of the Dandanaqan fortress, a small outpost in the middle of the desert near the city of Merv. They were hoping to find water and rest, but the Seljuks had already been there. The wells were either destroyed or contaminated. This was the breaking point. The Ghaznavid army was on the verge of collapse from thirst and exhaustion. Chaghri and Tughril knew the moment was right. The mighty Ghaznavid war machine was sputtering, vulnerable, and far from its supply lines. It was time to spring the trap. On May 23, 1040, the Seljuks finally offered battle. The Ghaznavid army, weary and desperate for water, deployed for a fight they had been chasing for weeks. They arranged themselves in a traditional formation: center, left wing, and right wing, with Sultan Mas'ud commanding from the center, surrounded by his elite guards and the war elephants. The Seljuks, in contrast, adopted a fluid, crescent-shaped formation. They were all on horseback, a sea of mobile archers. A portion of their forces charged forward, let loose a volley of arrows, and then pretended to flee in disarray. It was a tempting bait, and some of the Ghaznavid commanders, eager for glory, fell for it. They ordered their heavy cavalry to charge, hoping to shatter the fleeing enemy. This was a fatal mistake. The Seljuk horse archers were relentless. Their units were separated, their command structure was breaking down, and the constant harassment was taking a heavy toll. Sultan Mas'ud, seeing his army disintegrating, made a last, desperate gamble. He ordered a charge with his personal guard and the remaining war elephants, hoping to punch through the Seljuk center and kill their leaders. But even this failed. The agile Seljuk riders simply parted before the charge, letting the elephants pass through and then attack them from the flanks and rear. The elephants, wounded by arrows and maddened by the noise and chaos, became uncontrollable and ended up rampaging through their own lines, adding to the carnage. By the end of the day, the Ghaznavid army was no longer an army. It was a panicked mob. Many of Mas'ud's own commanders and troops, seeing the battle was lost, deserted him, trying to save themselves. Sultan Mas'ud himself barely escaped with his life, fleeing the battlefield with a small handful of bodyguards, leaving his royal treasury, his throne, and his empire's pride behind in the dust. The Battle of Dandanaqan was a total and catastrophic defeat for the Ghaznavids. For the Seljuks, it was a spectacular, empire-making victory. In a single day, they had shattered the military power of their greatest rival. The consequences were immediate and profound. The entire province of Khorasan fell into their hands. The road to Persia and beyond was now wide open. The Seljuk soldiers, who had been homeless wanderers just days before, now proclaimed their leader, Tughril Beg, as Sultan. They established a capital at Nishapur and began to build what would become the great Seljuk Empire. Within a few decades, this empire would stretch from Central Asia to the shores of the Mediterranean, encompassing Persia, Iraq, and Anatolia. The Seljuks became the new masters of the Islamic heartlands, and their arrival would trigger a chain of events that led directly to the First Crusade. And what of the Ghaznavid? They never recovered. The loss of Dandanaqan marked the beginning of their rapid decline. They lost all their western territories and were pushed back into what is now Afghanistan and northern India. They lingered on as a smaller, regional power for another century and a half. But their days as a great empire were over. Dandanaqan wasn't just a battle. It was the birth certificate of the Seljuk Empire and the death warrant for the Ghaznavid Golden Age. It stands as a timeless military lesson. A smaller, more mobile, and brilliantly led force can defeat a larger, more powerful but complacent enemy by using strategy, deception, and the environment itself as a weapon. The story of Dandanaqan is a testament to the genius of Tughril and Chaghri Beg and the unstoppable ambition of the Seljuk people. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this story of epic conquest and brilliant strategy as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the pivotal battles that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what other historical events you'd like to see covered. See you in the next video.